All right, everybody, welcome to the Regretful Pirates. I'd like to talk about the business model of the aquarium industry, which has changed over the years. It used to be just to try to keep their stuff alive, and now it's more of a deception on, scamming their victims, which are hobbyists, and most of all, the life that they claim to care about, which they don't really care about at all except getting their hands on it. I understand this passion. I used to have it. It's called saltwater fever. It's like a drug addiction. You just can't get enough. You want more, more, more. You got to have more tanks and more fish. I had them all over the house. I had so many I had to start a pet store. And then I had to go to the wholesalers to collect my own because they wouldn't send good stuff. And then from there, you end up collecting your own, and you end up working at wholesalers and so on and so forth. And throughout the many, many years that I've been in this business, the one thing that seems to be the main theme is sell it to them before it dies on us, because it's going to die. Most of them are going to die at every step of the supply chain. All I got to do is pass the cost down to the next person, and then they can pay for more and more death. Their trade show next year, which they have an annual trade show, they all get together and they stroke each other's egos and they lie to the hobbyist and try to say that everything they're doing is helping the world and the environment. Is they say it's going to be protecting our passion. And the passion that they're talking about is their drug addiction for fish and life and boxes and tanks. It's more about control and power and ego, and look at my tank and look at my fish and look at all this stuff that I have done. Well, it's actually in direct conflict with what they're claiming to be as their mission. And they say that, we're going to protect our passion and the environment. Well, protecting your passion, which is killing the environment, is in direct conflict with helping the environment. And all this captive bred aquaculture tank rate stuff is something they figured out a few years ago. They needed to rebrand their business because they realized that as the society of the world becomes more aware of what's going on, they need to say, oh, no, we're helping, we're covered. This, without us, they all couldn't survive. We're the saviors of the sea now. We're the ones that are going to save them. We're the ark, we're the this, we're the that. And they're nothing of the sort. They're the exact opposite. And that's the deception and the lies and the business model of the aquarium industry. It's about covering the truth of what's really going on. These things that they relabel these fish are actually doing more destruction to the environment than traditional collecting methods. For instance, tank rays. We've been over this before. They go out and they drag plankton toes around, or there's a company in Hawaii goes out and harasses the spawning fish that are having their baby. They go to the source and they collect these things and they destroy trillions and trillions of creatures to raise a few to sell to the hobbyists. And then basically the main thing they get out of it is they go, look what we have done. We are helping the environment. If it wasn't for us, the oceans are going to die. That's what they really get out of it, is a lie, and they get to continue on with the scam and the illusion. It's like a magic show. They want you to look at this hand it's doing something really good, but in fact, this hand is destroying more than they'll ever going to help. And that's the true business model of the aquarium industry, is to do more harm than good. They're always going to destroy much more life than they're ever going to save. And these captive bred aquacultured facilities that they have everywhere now are nothing more than a place that sits by the ocean. They pump the water in, they mix all these fish and all this stuff together, and then the water pours out back. It's actually an environmental contaminant waste hazard. It's destroying the environment through their wastewater. So even things that are captive bred or aquacultured are still destroying the environment. And not only that, it does no good anyways. I used to breed endangered species. I was one of the very first people to ever commercially breed and sell Banggai cardinals, which are endangered or threatened, whatever they want to call it, because of the aquarium trade. So we started breeding them and growing them and teaching other people. And then what we found out was they all just went into the same flawed system and died like the rest of the fish. Whether they were wild or captive bred or aquacultured or tank raised or whatever you called them, they were all going to die. And torturing any of these fish, no matter what name you put on them, what label you give them, is wrong. It's still wrong, no matter what you call them or where they come from. A fish is still a fish, no matter where it comes from or what you call it. And if you're going to destroy the environment to have captive bred aquacultured fish, then you are deceiving the public with your false marketing. And that's what it's all really about. They spend billions a year to deceive the public into thinking that they're doing something good when it's not good at all. It's bad. And there's all these links they try to throw at you are just their own links. It's nothing worth anything to anybody but them. It's destroying the environment for money and exploiting animals. That's all it is. And the sooner we realize what the truth is and what's really going on, then people can, make their own judgment, because just hearing one side of the story is never going to tell the whole thing. It's never going to tell the truth. Their sponsors and their paid ads don't allow them to tell the truth. And their trade shows and their magazines and all that, and their online whatever, their clubs and this and that, are all just there to deceive the next sucker. There's a sucker born every second, and they're right there ready to sell you a tank and a bottle of junk and a bunch of fish that you're going to have to replace next month anyways. It's all really just conservation camouflage. They're just trying to cover the exploitation of animals for profit by calling it conservation or sustainable or all kinds of other fake terms and words they use. They get to make up their own definitions now and misuse words all over the place. Like public aquariums, for instance, that they're the ones that buy some of the stuff. A lot of people say, why do you mix aquariums, pet stores, and zoos together? Well, they make up the wildlife sandwich of extinction. The aquariums and zoos are buying from the pet industry. That's how they get most of their little critters. The big ones they might get somewhere else, but the pet industry is supplying the aquariums and zoos. That's why I lump them all together. But the public aquariums and zoos are all using conservation camouflage. They're A's approved or accredited or whatever, which is just themselves, accrediting themselves. It'd be like me patting myself on the back, or like they do at their trade shows. Oh, look at the great things we have done. Well, there's nobody there to call them out on it except for now. And what they're doing is they're really covering the truth of what they do with a bunch of camouflage. It's an illusion trying to misdirect and redirect the truth about what they really do. Public aquariums and zoos are breeding creatures to go to other aquariums and zoos. They're not going back to the wild, just like all this captive bred aquaculture stuff. None of it will ever see the wild again. And even if it did, it would only be a faded copy of its original self. They can't release them because they've been mixed with other creatures, and they're never going to be like what nature can produce. They think they can reproduce nature, and they think they're even better than nature, but they're not. Nature has been doing it for eons. And they come along and go, oh, we're better than nature. Bull. It's untrue. It's not what it appears to be. It's conservation camouflage. They're just covering the truth of what they really do. They're not breeding animals to go into the wild, and it's not any kind of conservation. It's just exploiting animals for profit. And I think we ought to call these things what they really are. And that's why I'm here. I'm an aquarium whistleblower, and I'm going to tell the truth and expose what I've learned over the last 45 years. And if they don't like it, tough. But they better be ready for what's coming, because the truth is coming. And the truth is going to be the real conservation. We are the conservationists trying to protect the environment from the decades-long taking from aquariums, pet stores, and zoos. And to do true conservation, what we really need to do is stop the legal trade altogether, because the illegal trade piggybacks off of the legal trade. They hide all this stuff in extra boxes, and as long as they have an invoice, they can get all kinds of stuff out of there illegally, which is covered by the legal trade. And the only way to really stop all this stuff is to have a moratorium on any of this stuff coming out of the wild, whether it's for pets or aquariums or zoos, because these aquariums and zoos are not helping nature. There's very few putting things back. And if they do, they're under another name, a sanctuary or some other thing. But the only way to do real conservation would be to have these aquariums and zoos drain their tanks and empty their cages and repurpose to breed specific things to go back to the wild, to add to the environment instead of taking, which is what they've been doing for decades. They take. They need more. They need more of everything, which is the exact opposite of conservation. Taking from the wild and putting it on display for a little while until it dies, and then you need to get more, is the exact opposite of conservation. The only way they could really help is if they repurposed to release this stuff back to the wild by adding to the environment instead of taking.